Hello and welcome to this episode of Catching the Octopus Podcast with Niomi Hurley, yours truly. And today I just wanted to talk about the hard reality of spiritual and personal growth. Now, I'm a recovering people pleaser. And so it probably made it a bit trickier for the people around me as I went through this space. But I would often forego my own level of peace and my own needs to be able to support the needs of others. And in doing that, I attracted people into my life that could use my support in their day to day. Now, for me, this was established through my childhood. I grew up in a space where my emotional needs weren't always met. However, there was a high priority on me meeting other people's emotional needs. And so it was not only am I a complete empath, but it was also something that I learned and that became familiar to me is that if I could meet the emotional needs of people around me, then that would keep me safe, right? Because then there would be a level of stability in the environment. And so, unfortunately, though, I attracted people into my life that were vibrating at that same frequency. And so I spent a lot of my life meeting those needs even in the roles that I took in the business aspect, in the corporate, in my career as I progressed through. Not that I met people that needed me to meet their emotional needs, but obviously I needed to meet operational needs, right? And so I would often put myself second and those operational needs first ahead of what my own were. For example, there was a business I was working at. I was a solo parent the first time I was a solo parent, and it was my son's birthday. And there was a conference that needed to happen. They'd already bought tickets, and not many people could go. I ended up coming in on my day off work to go to that and didn't spend the day with my son for his birthday. I don't have any regrets in my life because I believe everything brings us up, but there are some things that I think probably I should have made different choices. That was one of them. Another time, it was a sports carnival that I missed, or it was a cross country, I think, that I missed because I had to travel for work when he was a bit older. Another time, my daughter was really looking forward to trick or treating, and there was an incident, and I had to travel up for work, and I missed the trick or treating. Now, in all of those instances, I made sure that there was still support for my children so that they felt their needs were met, but I missed out on that. Right? I missed out on the joy of celebrating those things because I was putting other people's needs first. Now, that made me a really great employee, but it wasn't filling my cup. It wasn't giving me the ability to be able to have strong boundaries around the things that were and weren't acceptable for me. So over time, I started meditating more, getting into more practices that would give me an inner strength of being able to say no, because no was not in my vocabulary. Hence, even my romantic relationships, I was in relationships where I would have to forgo my needs in my mind. Didn't have to. I chose to forgo my needs to be able to meet the needs of the other people because that's what a good partner does, right? Or a good wife does, or whatever the story I was telling myself. But the more I started meditating, the more I started healing, going through processing all of my subconscious programmings, I started questioning that, right? And I was like, hang on, why am I always saying yes? It makes me feel yuck. I don't feel great afterwards. I can, no is a word that I can actually use. And so when I first started saying no, it would be no, lots of different reasons why, right? To the point now where I'm at just, no, that doesn't feel right for me. Or no, I'm not doing that, which has been a long space coming for a recovering people pleaser. But as that started changing, as I did start saying no to people, that became a bit of conflict and a bit of an issue in my relationships. So, a relationship with my parents as the oldest child, and stereotypically being a female oldest child. I'm not saying that all men children don't do it as well, but that I felt like there was a lot of pressure on me to serve my parents. And so there was things that I would, drop everything, run out to go and help them with. My dad and mum and dad at the time were going through some legal stuff with neighbours and a couple of other things, and they needed letters written and they needed this done and they needed that done. Until a point where I actually said, look, no, I'm not. This isn't my battle to fight. This is a battle that you guys have created in your life and you're choosing to fight it. Kudos to you. It's not my battle to fight. And so I stepped away from that. But initially, the people in your life, when you say no, it's like, what's wrong? What's wrong with you? What's going on? Like, it actually can be offensive initially. Same with my relationship, right? With my romantic relationship. I was like in a relationship where I really want to be careful what I say here because I don't want to talk bad about the person in particular. But there was things that were set up in our relationship where it not coerced me. Yes, it coerced me, but I'm trying to think of a better word, where it resulted in me showing up at different times and doing different things that ended up meeting the requirements of what was established in the relationship. So an example, dinner was on the table at 5:30. So I had to be home from work at 5:30. And if I wasn't, then that would cause conflict, right? Because great, the dinner was someone went to the effort of making dinner, then you show up to have that dinner 100%. But there was no flexibility on shifting those times. Anyway, so that's just a small example. So when it got to the point where I started having a voice and I was just like, no, sorry, I'm not going to make that, and not making the other person's feelings my responsibility, that started creating conflict in my romantic relationship as well. And I got called cold-hearted, and I didn't love them anymore, or wasn't showing love anymore. And, all of the things. And it was something I had to process and go, no, I love this. I'm showing love very deeply, but I'm showing love for myself first, which shouldn't be something that someone should be punished for. I still showed up. I still made sure the house was in order. I still managed the rental that we had. I still showed affection. I still did all of the things that would be a reasonable partnership thing to do, but I stopped actually taking responsibility for other people's emotions and I started putting boundaries in place. And so now that leads me through to now where I'm quite strong in my ability to put boundaries in place. I'm really strong in my ethics. I hate lying with a passion, and that's got me into trouble a little bit during my life. But I always like to do what I think is ethically right. I've disintegrated professional relationships because I didn't feel the other person had the ethics. I've given up or not pursued different opportunities in my business that could have made me a lot of money because it didn't fit with me ethically, right? Because they were my boundaries. And I think I'll be rewarded for that in time. But at that moment, I was just like, oh, it was a really hard decision to make. Do I stick with my boundaries or do I pursue something that's going to bring in a lot of financial wealth? I have even recently had someone that was just messaging me, someone I knew from years ago, that will refer to me as babe and hun and those sorts of things. And that gives me the ick. I don't really like it. And numerous times I said, can you please not do that? I have a name. They've tried to justify it going, I do it with everyone. I'm like, I don't care if you do it with everyone. I've asked you not to do it with me. And then that also brings up the issue of consent as well. If you've asked someone not to do something and they continue to do it, then they obviously don't see consent as valid. But anyway, that's a whole a different podcast. And so it was a very strong boundary to the point where I was like, oh, you know what? I'm not up for this conversation anymore. If you're going to continue to do something that makes me feel uncomfortable, as something as simple as the words that you're using and how you call me. I had someone else around me, another relationship that I have, that likes to make jokes, but the jokes are actually poking fun at people. And I don't find that funny anymore. And so I don't laugh. And they're like, oh, what's wrong with you? Or, that was a joke. And I go, well, can you explain how that's funny? Like, well, how is that meant to be funny? And they very much can't. And so because I'm asking these questions out of curiosity, people can actually get the feeling that it's attacking them or attacking their persona or whatever else is going through their mind, because that's not how gnomes behaves, right? Gnomes is cruisy. Gnomes just puts up with a whole heap of stuff. And I did for a long time. I was very much in a space where I kind of felt like, well, you've just got to go with the flow because that makes you a cool person. And, I'm carefree and I'm like the perfect girlfriend because nothing ever phases me. I just put up with everything. Anyway, that was the way that in my mind helped me show up at my best. Whereas now that I've done a lot of the processing and the healing, I realize that I still have a ton of kindness and empathy that I show to so many people. For anyone that feels energy, you can feel it when I'm talking in my podcasts, right? Like I'm not, maybe every now and again an ego will come out because I do have ego, but a lot of the times my communication comes from love and empathy. It doesn't come ego driven trying to be a hero. And so I still have all of those things, but they're coming from a place of my worth first. And that can be confronting for a lot of people. So, if you're embarking on this journey of spiritual growth and personal growth, there is a point where it can get really super lonely. Oh, I can feel emotion coming through from that. Excuse me, because it's really quite raw, especially when there's people that you felt were your people, right? That you allowed into your inner circle that you realized were kind of only there because of how you served them, not because of really how they felt about you. Oh, sorry, bit vulnerable moment there. And so that can be really hard to go through. And it's very easy, I suppose, to fall back into, oh no, I need to please them, rather than holding your boundaries strong. But when we get to a place of holding the boundaries strong, the reality of people dropping away becomes a real thing. And that's not easy. And so this is one of those aspects where people will say, oh, healing and growth isn't easy. It just, it might look easy, but it's not, because it's not. But the thing is, once those relationships, if they do end up having to drop away, and those people decide that they no longer want to engage with you anymore because you're not serving their needs, trust me when I say this, the right people will show up. The people that do vibrate at your frequency will show up. And that's the next step that's really tricky, is then navigating peace. Having relationships where it's smooth and it's easy and there's no expectations and someone values you for you, not what you do for them, not how you make them feel, not how you show up for them, not how you serve them, but purely just because of you and who you are. And that can be scary in itself, right? Because then it's kind of like, hang on, where's the catch? This is a bit too good to be true. And that can create a whole new level of stuff and unfortunately can trigger up more stuff to heal and grow and develop through. So if you're looking at this, if you're in this point in your life where you're experiencing this, then all I say is when you're looking at the things, the decisions that you're making, I used to ask myself this question and go, am I doing this from the right place? So if you're saying no to hurt someone else or to upset someone else, then that's a different ball game. But if you're just saying no because it doesn't serve you, that's okay. Part of the court stuff that my parents were going through ended up seeing my dad go to prison for a little bit. And at one point, he was in maximum security prison. He was there for a couple of weeks. And my mum reached out to me and said, oh, I'm going to visit dad on this day. If you come out and you be ready at 10 o'clock and you do this and blah-de, rah. I'm like, oh, okay. And I hung up the phone and I'm like, I don't want to go to prison to visit my dad. And I sat in it for a little bit and I had a conversation with a really good friend of mine. And I'm like, I didn't cause the issues that were there. They were personal choices that were made, and validated from their own experiences, not judging them for that. But I don't want to go into a prison. And she's like, well, don't. And at that moment in my head, I'm like, oh my God, I have a choice. And it was probably one of the most difficult things I had to do is I made the phone call and it was like, oh, you ready? You're coming out. And I said, I'm not going to visit. And it was like, what? Like the shock in the voice. I'm like, I don't want to. And it was just simple as that. I don't want to, and I'm not going to. And it was a very empowering moment to be able to have that space of saying that. And yeah, I'm just going back through. It was tricky. It wasn't easy. And then fighting the potential guilt afterwards, because any of my fellow people pleasers out there would be going, oh, yeah, but what about the guilt from saying no? Sitting in and reminding myself, I didn't do that to upset them. I did that to serve me. And then if the guilt would come up, I didn't do it to upset anyone. I did it to serve me. And sometimes when you do make decisions, it might upset the people around you. But if that's not your intention, then, and it's coming from a good place, it's coming from positivity, it's coming from a place of love, then it's okay to say no. It's okay to not do the things other people expect you to do. And I think it's even more prominent for women in, their late 40s or even 30s, some of them go through, that start going through perimenopause, right? Because that the hormones and chemicals in our brain that were there that made us so serving of everyone around us are starting to deplete, and women are questioning things and going, well, hang on a minute. I actually don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to show up like that anymore. And are starting to have boundaries, which creates a whole heap of issues for romantic relationships and family relationships and of the like. Because we come into this space where we're like, hey, I've served everyone for my whole life, and now it's time to start serving me. So, one of the things that I found helped me through this was meditation. If anyone asked me what's the number one thing that you would recommend for everyone to do every day, I would say meditate. And so every morning when I get up, there's a couple of mornings if I'm out and about staying with other people or doing things that I can't do it, I won't. But even when I went to Bali for my holiday, I was by myself, so I could. Every morning I get up and I give myself a half an hour to 45. I make myself a cup of tea. I sit down, I listen to some spiritual teachings around energy, spirituality, being a good person, all of those sorts of things, how we can show up, how we can create more self-love. And then I do a meditation, which has at least 3 to 10 minutes of complete silence in it. So the meditations I do are blessing meditations. So then I'm channeling through energy to bless, which then is a cleansing effect and cleanses out and takes out all of that energy that's blocking my lens on how I can see things clearly. And then I give myself that moment of silence. Now, that moment of silence has a few different things that it does. One, it allows us to receive messages if there's messages we need to receive. They're not always things that we have as in thoughts or hear things. Sometimes they're just downloads that go into our system, right? That can actually help us show up different. Another thing it does is it helps remind us that we are the controller of our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So when we make our mind go into silence, then it shows the whole system that the I am is in control. The thoughts aren't in control. The emotions aren't in control. The body isn't in control. The inner soul is what actually is in control. And it reinforces that. And so by doing that, it gives a lot more connection to self, the lower self and the higher self. Some people do this through prayer. Where they will actually pray and then give themselves silence to see the messages that are coming in. Some people say that they meditate when they're riding their motorcycles or fishing or anything like that. Although that's great to have those things because you're following probably the level of excitement in your life. It brings you joy and it does help you zone out. It's not true meditation because you can't have that time of just complete silence where you shut everything off. Now, as someone who's undiagnosed ADD or ADHD, it was very tricky in the start to get silence. And sometimes I still don't. If I've got lots going on in my life, it can be hard to get the silence, but I attempt to do it every single day to remind myself that I'm in control of my thoughts, in control of my emotions, and in control of my behaviors. And yeah, so it's very interesting on the days when I've really blissed out, has just been absolutely amazing. But sometimes it's just why they call it a meditation practice, right? Because it's a practice that we do every day. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. If you are looking to start meditating, my recommendations would be find this, try and do it in the same spot if you can at the same time and have the same ritual around it. So whether that's if you're lighting a candle, I don't personally light a candle, but whether that's doing that, whether that's wearing a particular sash or having a particular crystal with you, whatever that might be. For me, it's just sitting in my chair. Got a chair in my bedroom in this house that I sit in to meditate in every day. So I sit down with my cup of tea, listen, have my cup of tea while I'm listening, and then I do the actual meditation practice. And so as soon as I do that, the brain goes, we're doing this again, hey? And it already gets the whole system all settled in and ready to go. So doing that gave me, because I have been able to increase that connection with my lower self and my higher self, that gave me the ability to have those boundaries, and it gave me more strength to let things fall away that were no longer serving me. Even the ones that created a lot of pain, I was able to have acceptance that maybe they're not in my highest good. I didn't look to sabotage them. I didn't look to create pain in them. I did have conversations with people around me and go, hey, I'm curious. I've got questions on these behaviors that you did that actually adversely affected me, and I need to understand them more. Did it do that? Yeah, it did. And did that create some breakdown in relationships? Yeah, it did, because not everyone likes having those conversations, right? But again, approaching it from the right way with the right perspective, the right intention, and approaching it from curiosity, no blaming. Yeah, that was able to get me into a place now where I am able to have the boundaries that I have. And my boundaries aren't out there completely weird. They are just being treated respectfully, acknowledging if I'm asking for something, like not being called pet names by people that aren't close to me. There's some people that I do let call me pet names because the relationship's at a level where that's okay, right? Also going into romantic relationships, I know that now I won't walk past my boundaries just to keep the peace or make the relationship work, which hopefully is going to land me a more compatible partner, which will be very interesting to see in the future. But I have, one of my things is I like to receive constant communication. And there was someone that I was dating last year that felt that that was too needy and actually said, oh, you're too needy. And at first I was like, oh, and that kind of shook me. I'm like, I'm not a needy person. And I sat in that a little bit and then went back to them and said, I know you see it as needy, but for me, that's a bare minimum. And I'm okay with that. Like, I don't expect to see you every day. I don't expect for you to drop everything and run to me all the time, but I do expect constant communication and consistency. And I'm okay with that. If you feel that that's needy or you feel that's unrealistic, then that shows that we're not compatible. So, showing up now with a few more boundaries in the way, even with my clients, I have clients that I interact with. We do a discovery call. If I don't feel there's an alignment or I feel that there's not going to work out in the way of working together, I'll refer them to another therapist. I'm very much okay with going, I want the best for them. And if I'm not going to be able to serve them in a particular way, then they're better off seeing someone else. So it has totally changed the way that I show up in my whole life. Do I still sometimes forgo myself for the greater good? Yeah, I do. Do I still sometimes put my kids before myself? Yeah, I do. But when I do it now, it's a conscious choice to do it. And I'm kind of like, I'm okay with doing this because in most of those cases, it does ultimately serve me. So if I have to stop everything I'm doing to go and help my daughter with something and then I see joy in her face, then that brings me joy, right? Plus parenting is a little bit different. I kind of signed up for that, right? It's not like another adult human that's needing that from me. Um, so there are still some times where I will put people first, but now it's a choice. Right. It's not something that I feel driven to do and then have all of that angst about it and resentment about doing it. I actually do it as a choice and it becomes enjoyable. So if there's any other recovering or current people pleasers out there, I hope that's added some value on the way that you can do that. If you're already, start meditating, complete game changer. But when you're approaching those boundaries, just have a think and go, is my intention right? If you're setting a boundary that you know is going to upset another person, then that's not right. If you're setting boundaries in a way to control another person, I mean, they're not really boundaries, but you know, I'm going, that's not right either. The boundaries are meant to be to keep your peace. That's what boundaries are for, is to allow yourself to be in a space where you feel peaceful and you feel content, but also making sure that it's not purposely going to upset the lives of the people around you. If unintentionally it does, well, that's kind of on them, not on you. So I hope you got some value, as I said, and enjoyed the content of this episode. And I look forward to serving you again in our next episode.